He never expected a simple night with friends to turn into the kind of story that would stay with him forever. The evening started like any other, with laughter and drinks in a crowded apartment on the edge of the city. His friends were teasing each other, joking, and daring one another to do little reckless things. It was one of those nights where nothing serious was supposed to happen, and yet everything changed in the blink of an eye. Someone mentioned the vampire in town, a mysterious figure who was rumored to move through the city unseen. Someone beautiful, dangerous, and untouchable. They spoke in whispers, half in jest, half in awe, about her elegance and her icy charm. He had seen her once from a distance, standing alone on a balcony in the moonlight. Her hair dark as night and eyes that seemed to pierce straight through anyone who looked at her. He had thought she was just a story, a rumor people told to scare newcomers. But there was a strange truth to her presence that even he could not ignore. The conversation shifted quickly. Someone, laughing too loudly, said, "I bet you can't get her to go out with you. I dare you to ask her on a date." The room erupted into laughter, and all eyes turned to him. He frowned, feeling a mix of irritation and excitement. He had never been one to back down from a challenge, even a foolish one. "You're on," he said, surprising even himself. The words left his mouth before he could think twice. His friends cheered, raising their glasses. The bet was made, the dare accepted, and suddenly the night felt charged with electricity. He could feel a nervous thrill running through him, a mix of fear and anticipation. The next step was simple in theory, but terrifying in practice. He had to find her. The city at night was alive with sounds, streetlights casting long shadows on the sidewalks, and the occasional hum of traffic. He walked through the streets, thinking about what he would say, rehearsing phrases that felt both ridiculous and necessary. He was trying to prepare himself for a simple conversation, yet deep down, he knew this would not be simple. He found her exactly where the rumors said she would be. She was leaning against a stone wall in a quiet alley, her eyes closed, as if she were listening to some music only she could hear. Her posture was graceful, almost regal, and the faint glow of the streetlight caught the curve of her cheek, highlighting her beauty in a way that made him catch his breath. The air seemed to change around her, cooler, sharper, charged with an energy that made him feel alive and cautious at the same time. He approached slowly, heart hammering in his chest. Every step felt heavy, yet impossible to stop. She opened her eyes as he drew near, and it was as if she had known he would come all along. Her gaze was intense, piercing, but not unfriendly. He swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how small he felt under her stare, how ordinary he seemed compared to the aura she carried effortlessly. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, her voice smooth and calm, yet carrying an edge that made him pay attention. He realized instantly that this was no ordinary woman, no ordinary conversation. Every word, every movement seemed measured, precise, as if she were calculating the world in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. He nodded, fumbling slightly, unsure of how to start. Yeah, I wanted to ask if you would go out with me." The words sounded ridiculous even as they left his mouth, and he felt a rush of embarrassment. He expected a laugh, a polite refusal, maybe even a glare that would make him retreat and feel small for days. But she smiled. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it reached her eyes and changed everything. "Yes," she said simply. The word was soft but firm, carrying a weight that made his chest tighten. He blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. Yes. She had said yes. His mind raced. The bet, the dare. The reckless challenge. It suddenly felt like the beginning of something much larger than he could have imagined. There was a thrill in the danger, in the unknown, in the fact that he was about to step into a world he barely understood. His friend's laughter echoed in his memory, distant now, replaced by the quiet intensity of standing before someone who could easily change his life forever. She stepped closer. The air between them seemed to shift. He could feel the strength in her presence, the subtle power that made him both nervous and fascinated. She didn't say much, but her eyes spoke volumes, observing him with a curiosity that matched his own. The world around them faded, leaving only the narrow alley, the dim light, and the strange connection that had sparked in that single word, yes. They began to walk together. Slowly, talking about simple things at first places in the city, music, books. He noticed how she listened, really listened, making him feel seen in a way few people ever had. Yet beneath the calm conversation, he could sense an undercurrent of something else, something deeper. A hint of danger and mystery that kept him alert. Every small gesture, every flicker of her expression, suggested layers he could not yet understand. By the time the night had grown deep and the streets quiet, he realized he was caught in a web of fascination and fear. The bet had been foolish, a joke meant to entertain his friends. But it had led him here, to this moment, with a vampire who had said yes, who had invited him into her world without hesitation. And he knew, somewhere deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. He returned home as the first light of dawn began to touch the city, his mind racing with the events of the night. His friends were still asleep, unaware of the true nature of what had happened. He thought about her smile, the intensity of her eyes, and the strange sense of destiny that seemed to hang between them. The bet had been a dare, a joke, but the result was something far more serious. Something that felt real in a way he couldn't ignore. As he drifted into a restless sleep, he could not shake the feeling that his life had just been opened to a world beyond imagination. The night had started with laughter and dares, but it had ended with a promise, unspoken but undeniable. She had said yes, and in doing so, she had changed everything. He was about to enter a life he could never have dreamed of, and the adventure had only just begun. The next evening found himself waiting outside the small cafe where they had agreed to meet. He was nervous, heart racing, palms sweaty, but also strangely excited. It was not just a date. It was the first step into a world he barely understood. The air felt heavier, charged with anticipation as he watched the street for her arrival. People passed by without noticing, but he felt as if time itself had slowed down around him. Then he saw her, gliding down the sidewalk with an elegance that seemed almost unnatural. Her hair caught the fading light of the sun, and her eyes held that piercing intensity he could never forget. She smiled slightly as she approached, not the playful smile of a friend, but one that carried awareness and power. He felt a shiver run down his spine, a mixture of awe and fear. "Hello," she said, her voice calm and smooth, yet commanding attention. There was no need for introductions, no awkward small talk to start. It felt as if the world had already recognized her presence, and he was merely following along. He cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. Hello. "I'm glad you came." She tilted her head slightly, studying him as if assessing whether he belonged in her world. Then, with a soft chuckle, she said, "I would not miss this for anything." They entered the cafe, a quiet place tucked away from the city's noise. The interior was cozy, warm, with soft lights that cast gentle shadows. He had chosen it intentionally, thinking that a calm environment would balance the tension he already felt. But as soon as they sat across from each other, the calm vanished. She had a presence that demanded awareness, that made the ordinary feel extraordinary. Conversation began slowly. They talked about simple things, books, music, the city's hidden corners. He tried to keep it light, asking questions, making jokes. But he could feel the weight of her gaze on him, noting every word, every reaction. There was an intimacy in the way she listened, as if she were absorbing more than just sounds, as if she could see the truth behind his thoughts. After a while, he dared to ask, "Do you ever get tired of people being afraid of you?" She looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. "Some are afraid, some are curious. I find fear tiresome, yes. Curiosity, however, can be entertaining." Her words were soft, but there was an edge that reminded him she was not someone to underestimate. He laughed nervously. "I guess I'm more curious than afraid." She tilted her head, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Good. Curiosity is the start of understanding. And understanding is, well, it is rare." As the evening progressed, he began to notice subtle hints of her nature. The way she moved, almost too fast for a human. The way she seemed to sense his emotions before he spoke them. The way her presence made him hyper-aware of every sound and movement around them. It was thrilling and terrifying. He felt alive in a way he had never felt before. Yet he also felt the caution that came with being near someone who could easily overpower him. They left the cafe as night fell, the streets bathed in the glow of streetlights. He suggested a walk, and she agreed, leading him down quiet alleys and along hidden paths he had never noticed before. She spoke about the city with a knowledge that seemed centuries old, about places humans ignored, about moments and histories invisible to ordinary eyes. He listened, fascinated, but also aware that he was being drawn deeper into a world he did not fully understand. Then, without warning, she stopped and turned to him, eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him catch his breath. "You accepted a bet," she said softly, almost like a statement rather than a question. "Did you truly know what you were asking for?" He hesitated, unsure how to respond. I thought it was just a dare. A stupid joke. But now I see it's more than that. I think I wanted this, even if I didn't fully understand it." Her smile was small, but genuine. "Good honesty is appreciated." Then, in a flash, she snapped her fingers, and he felt an electric jolt pass through him. It was not painful, but it was intense, a reminder of the power she held. His heart raced, his body tensed, and for a moment he saw her not as a companion, but as something untouchable, something dangerous. And yet, he did not step back. Somehow, he wanted to stay. They continued walking, now in a silence filled with tension and anticipation. He noticed every detail, the way she breathed, the slight tilt of her head, the way shadows seemed to bend around her. It was mesmerizing. His mind raced with thoughts, questions, fears, in a strange excitement he could not name at one point. She stopped at the edge of a small park, the moonlight casting her in silver. She looked at him, her expression softening slightly. "You will learn that there are rules in my world. Things you may not like, things that will challenge you. Do you understand?" He nodded, though he was not entirely sure what he was agreeing to. "I think I want to learn." She studied him for a long moment, then reached out, placing a hand lightly on his arm. The touch was electric, sending shivers down his spine. "Then you will be tested. But do not fear. Fear is natural, but it must be controlled. Do you think you can do that?" He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her presence, the seriousness of her words. I will try." The night continued with moments of quiet conversation, interspersed with sudden flashes of her ability, speed, agility, perception beyond normal human limits. He was awed and slightly frightened, but he felt a strange sense of trust growing between them. She was dangerous, yes, but she was also guiding him, showing him glimpses of a life he had never imagined. As the night grew late, they returned to the street where they had met. She turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. "This is only the beginning," she said. "Do not forget that." He nodded, heart pounding. "I won't." And with that, she disappeared into the shadows, leaving him standing alone under the streetlight, the city quiet around him. He felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear, knowing that this first date had changed everything. The bet had led him here, but it was no longer about a dare. It was about something real, something dangerous, and something that could not be undone. As he walked home, he replayed every moment in his mind. Her words, her presence, the snap of her fingers, the way she seemed to see him so clearly. He realized that he was caught in a world he barely understood, a world that was thrilling, terrifying, and impossible to resist. The first date was over, but the story was just beginning. And he knew, deep down, that his life would never be the same again. Days passed after the first date, but he could not get her out of his mind. Her presence, her voice, the way she looked at him, it haunted his thoughts and made his ordinary world feel dull and empty. Every sound in the city seemed muted compared to the memory of her voice, and every shadow reminded him of the intensity she carried. He knew that seeing her again was no longer a choice. It had become a need he could not ignore. They met again, this time in a quiet part of the city by an abandoned park. The moon was full, and the night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and leaves. She appeared as if from nowhere, her movements silent and precise. She greeted him with a smile that was both warm and chilling at the same time. Her eyes seemed to see straight into his mind, and he felt exposed, but not in a way that made him want to run. Instead, he felt a strange comfort, as if she understood him better than anyone else ever could. "You came," she said softly, stepping closer. Her presence was overwhelming, and he could feel a strange energy pulsing in the air around her. He nodded, unsure how to speak, feeling words fail him in front of her power and grace. "I needed to," he said finally. "I can't stop thinking about you." She tilted her head, a faint smile on her lips. "Good, because this is only the beginning. There is more you need to see, more you need to understand." They walked together, and she began to show him small glimpses of her world. They moved through the city in ways that no human could follow, slipping through shadows, moving faster than his eyes could track. He felt exhilaration and fear in equal measure. She spoke little, but every word carried weight, every glance seemed meaningful. He realized that he was learning that the world he had known was only a small part of what existed. Then, in a secluded garden, bathed in moonlight, she stopped. Her expression was serious now, and he felt the shift immediately. She looked at him, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his heart pound. "You are ready," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness in it that he could not ignore. "There is something I need to do, something that will change you." He swallowed hard, fear and excitement twisting together. "Change me?" he asked. "How?" She did not answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, and he could feel her warmth, or perhaps the illusion of it. She raised her hand, and before he could react, she touched his neck lightly. The contact was electric, sending shivers through his entire body. His breath caught, and his knees felt weak. He had never felt anything like this. A mixture of danger and attraction that made it impossible to look away. "I need to bond with you," she said finally. "It will be quick, but it will matter. After this, you will not be the same." He nodded, too stunned to speak. His mind raced with questions, doubts, fears, but there was also an undeniable trust growing inside him. Somehow he knew he wanted this, needed this, even if he could not fully understand why. She leaned closer, and then, with a precision that startled him, she bit him. The pain was sharp at first, but it quickly transformed into something strange. Almost electric, a sensation that coursed through his veins and made him feel alive in a way he never had before. His vision blurred for a moment, colors shifting and intensifying, and he could feel every sound, every movement around him. Heightened to an overwhelming degree, he stumbled back, clutching his arm, and she caught him. Her eyes filled with concern and something deeper, something he could not name. "It is done," she said softly. "You are mine now in a way that cannot be undone." The bite left a mark, faint but unmistakable. He could feel it throbbing, pulsing with a strange energy that connected him to her. His senses were sharper, his thoughts clearer, yet he also felt an ache, a hunger that he did not understand. He looked at her, both terrified and fascinated. Realizing that he had crossed a line from which there was no return, she guided him to a nearby bench, helping him sit as he tried to process the sensations flooding his body. He could feel the bond between them, subtle but undeniable, like a thread connecting his mind and heart to hers. He realized, with both awe and fear, that he was now a part of her world, whether he wanted it or not. "You may feel strange," she said, her voice gentle. "You may not understand everything at first. That is natural. Your body, your mind, even your emotions will change. But you are not alone." "I am with you," he nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and trepidation. The fear of the unknown was strong, but the trust he felt toward her. The bond that had been established gave him a strange comfort. He realized that she had chosen him in a way humans could not. And that recognition carried weight beyond anything he had ever experienced. Over the next few hours, she stayed with him, guiding him through the initial effects of the bite. His senses continued to sharpen. He could hear distant sounds, see in near darkness, feel the subtle shifts in the air. The world felt different, alive in a way it had never been before. He was overwhelmed, but she remained calm, a steady presence that anchored him amidst the chaos of new sensations. They talked quietly, though much of the conversation was more about presence than words. He learned small things about her life, about her experiences, about the way she had lived for centuries. Each story carried a weight, a depth that made him realize the enormity of the world he had stepped into. He felt humbled, fascinated, and terrified. All at once, by the time the night was nearly over, he was exhausted but exhilarated. His body still pulsed with the energy of the bite, and his mind was alive with new awareness. She looked at him, her expression softening. "You have endured the first step," she said. "There are more to come, but you have taken this one well." He smiled weakly, still feeling the strange sensations coursing through him. I don't know how to thank you," he said, "or even how to explain how I feel." Her smile was gentle, almost affectionate. "There is no need for words. You will learn in time. For now, rest. Your life has changed and you must be ready for what comes next." As he followed her silently back to the edge of the park, he realized the truth of her words. Nothing would ever be the same again. He was connected to her, changed by her, and drawn into a world that was both beautiful and dangerous. The bite had marked him, but it had also awakened something inside him, a curiosity, desire, and a bond that would not be broken. When he finally returned home, the city felt different. The night air seemed charged with energy, and every shadow, every sound, carried a meaning he had never noticed before. He lay awake, feeling the lingering effects of the bite, aware that he was no longer just himself. He was a part of her world, a world that was thrilling, terrifying, and utterly compelling. He knew with certainty that this was only the beginning. The first step into her life had been taken, and the bond between them had been sealed. Fear, excitement, curiosity, and awe swirled together inside him, creating a mixture of emotions that he had never experienced. He was not just a human anymore. He was part of something larger, something eternal. He could not turn back. The night faded into dawn, but sleep did not come easily. His thoughts were filled with her presence, the bite, the sensations that still pulsed through him. He realized that he was no longer merely a man who had accepted a bet. He was her mate, bound to her in a way that went beyond understanding. And he knew, deep in his heart, that this bond was only the start of a journey that would change everything he had ever known. Days turned into weeks, and he slowly began to feel the full effect of the bite. His senses were sharper, his reflexes quicker, and his awareness of the world around him more acute. He could feel her presence even when she was not near, a pull that drew him toward her. It was both comforting and unnerving, and he realized that he could not ignore it, no matter how hard he tried. His friends noticed a change in him. He seemed more alert, more focused, and yet more distant, as if a part of him existed somewhere else entirely. They asked questions, trying to understand why he had become different, but he could not explain. How could he? How could he describe a bond that tied him to someone who existed in a world beyond human understanding? The vampire visited him often, sometimes in public, sometimes in secret. She introduced him to small pieces of her world, letting him glimpse the dangers and wonders that existed beyond ordinary life. There were other vampires, each with their own rules and territories. Some were friendly, curious, or indifferent. Others were hostile, watching him with suspicion or open contempt. He had to learn quickly how to navigate this world, and he was aware that mistakes could be deadly. One night, she brought him to a hidden place deep in the city. It was quiet, except for the faint hum of energy that seemed to flow through the air. Here she explained the rules he had to follow. Loyalty, discretion, respect, these were not just words. They were laws of her world, binding and unforgiving. He listened carefully, absorbing every detail. Realizing that his life depended on understanding and following them, at first he struggled. His human instincts sometimes clashed with the rules she set. He wanted to speak freely, to act without thought, to assert himself in ways that were natural to humans but dangerous in her world. She corrected him gently but firmly, showing him the consequences of mistakes, the subtle ways in which power could shift, and the dangers of underestimating those around them. Despite the difficulties, he felt a growing confidence. Each challenge he faced strengthened his bond with her, teaching him patience, observation, and restraint. He began to understand her world not just as a dangerous place, but as a place with structure, logic, and beauty. He saw her in a new light, not just as a powerful being, but as someone who had lived long enough to know the consequences of actions, the value of trust, and the strength of connection. One evening, while walking through a quiet alley, they encountered a hostile vampire who did not welcome humans near their territory. The confrontation was tense. The other vampire moved quickly, striking with precision and menace. He froze for a moment, overwhelmed by fear, but she was beside him instantly, her movements a blur. She protected him, deflecting the attack, and then placed him behind her as she confronted the threat. The other vampire retreated, leaving them unharmed. But the danger was a sharp reminder of the stakes involved. Afterward, she looked at him seriously. "You see, you are part of this now. You cannot ignore it. You cannot act without thought. But you survived, and you learned. That is what matters." He nodded, still feeling the adrenaline and fear coursing through him. I understand. I want to be ready. I want to learn." Her expression softened. "And you will, but it will take time. You will fail at times, and you must be prepared to accept that. Growth comes through challenge, not ease." In the following weeks, he began to adapt to his new life. He practiced moving with her speed, sensing changes in the air, noticing details he had never seen before. He learned to read people, creatures, and situations in ways he could not before. He learned to trust his instincts, guided by her presence and her subtle corrections. Each success, each small victory, strengthened his confidence and deepened his bond with her. Yet it was not only danger that shaped him. There were moments of quiet intimacy and understanding. She shared stories of her past, moments of joy and loss, laughter and sorrow. He learned to see her not only as a powerful vampire, but as a being with emotions, history, and vulnerability. In these moments, the bond between them grew stronger, built not only on necessity and danger, but on trust and understanding. There were also moments of ordinary life that were extraordinary, simply because they were shared. They walked through the city at night, ate in small diners where no one else seemed to notice them, and watched the sunrise together. He began to see the beauty in small things, the way ordinary life could feel magical when shared with someone who understood the world beyond the surface, that his human instincts still clashed with the supernatural rules, and there were times he struggled. But with her guidance, he learned to balance fear, excitement, and responsibility. He began to accept that his life was no longer entirely his own. It was shared with her, connected in ways he could feel deep in his chest. The bond between them was growing stronger every day, more undeniable, more real. One night, as they sat together in the quiet of her hidden world, she looked at him and said softly, "You have changed. And not just because of the bite. You have grown. You are learning what it means to exist in my world, to survive, to understand. That is the true test, and you are passing it." He smiled, feeling a sense of pride and relief. "Thank you. For guiding me, for being patient. I know I still have a lot to learn." She reached out, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. "And I will be here, always. But remember, this is only part of the journey. More challenges will come, and you must be ready." He nodded, understanding that the trials were far from over. But he felt ready, more than he ever had, to face whatever came next. The fear had not disappeared, but it was tempered by trust, skill, and the bond they shared. He had begun to accept his place in her world. And with that acceptance came a strength he had never known before. As dawn approached, he realized how far he had come. The bite had changed him, but so had the lessons, the dangers, and the quiet moments of understanding. He was no longer just a human who had accepted a bet. He was a part of a world filled with danger, beauty, and power. And through it all, he was connected to her in a way that was unbreakable. He looked at her one last time before leaving, the first light of morning illuminating her features. "I am ready," he said quietly. "For whatever comes next." Her smile was faint but genuine. "Good. Because the journey is far from over, and we have much to face together." And with that, he walked back into the city, aware of his growth, his bond, and the challenges that awaited him. He was no longer the same person who had taken a bet for a dare. He was part of her world now, a world that demanded courage, trust, and understanding. And he knew, deep in his heart, that he was ready to face it side by side with her, as her mate and companion. The days that followed were unlike anything he had ever known. His life was no longer simply human. It was intertwined with hers, bound by a connection that went beyond explanation. Every step he took, every sound he heard, and every moment he experienced seemed more intense, more vivid, and more alive than before. He could feel her presence even from afar, a constant pull that guided him, comforted him, and reminded him that he was no longer alone. They spent their time together exploring the city at night, learning about each other and the world she had inhabited for centuries. He saw the city through new eyes, noticing details that he had ignored before, hearing whispers in the wind and sensing the movements of creatures hidden from ordinary view. The nights were filled with excitement and discovery, but also with lessons about trust, restraint, and responsibility. She taught him to move silently, to read situations, and to understand the subtle signals of the supernatural world. One evening, they walked through an old part of the city, narrow streets lined with buildings that had stood for centuries. She spoke of her past, of moments she had witnessed, of the changes she had seen, and of the people she had known. Each story carried weight and meaning, and he listened, fascinated. He realized that she was not only powerful, but wise, shaped by experiences that humans could barely imagine. He felt honored that she shared these moments with him, and he knew that the trust between them was growing stronger every day. They encountered other vampires occasionally, some curious, some wary, some openly hostile. Each encounter tested him, challenging his instincts and forcing him to apply what he had learned. He learned to remain calm, to observe before acting, and to rely on the bond they shared. She guided him through each situation, never taking over, but offering support and protection when needed. Slowly, he began to feel confident, capable, and even proud of how far he had come. One night, a particularly dangerous encounter occurred. A group of hostile vampires had been tracking her, and their path crossed with theirs in a dark, abandoned plaza. The tension was immediate, the danger palpable. He froze for a moment, fear threatening to overwhelm him. But she placed a hand on his arm, grounding him. "Trust me," she whispered. He nodded, taking a deep breath. Together, they moved with precision and coordination. She intercepted attacks, guided him to safe positions, and demonstrated her incredible speed and strength. He followed her lead, feeling the bond between them synchronize their movements. The hostile vampires eventually retreated, recognizing the strength and unity between them. The experience left him exhilarated, his heart racing. But it also reinforced the reality that he was now part of a world that demanded courage and skill. Afterward, they sat in a quiet alley, the adrenaline fading and the night growing calm. He looked at her, seeing not only her power, but the care she had shown him, the trust she had placed in him, and the bond that had grown stronger through danger. I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You could have done everything yourself, but you included me." She smiled softly. "Because you are not just someone I protect. You are my mate. And mates share everything: danger, discovery, and life itself." The word struck him deeply. He realized fully for the first time that he was no longer merely a human who had accepted a bet. He was part of her existence, bound to her in a way that was eternal, profound, and unbreakable. Fear mingled with awe, excitement with reverence, and he understood that the bond between them was not just emotional, but essential. Something that could not be undone. As time passed, their connection deepened. They shared ordinary moments that felt extraordinary simply because they were together. They walked through moonlit streets, shared meals, and laughed at small jokes. Yet each ordinary moment carried a weight of intimacy and trust that could not be found in any previous human relationship. He felt understood, seen, and accepted in ways that transcended ordinary experience. Her presence became a guide and anchor for him. When he felt doubt or fear, she was there, offering quiet reassurance and subtle lessons. He learned patience, understanding, and how to balance his human instincts with the realities of her world. Each challenge, each moment of growth, strengthened both his confidence and the bond they shared. One night, as they watched the city from a rooftop, he realized how far he had come. The fear that had once gripped him was tempered by understanding, skill, and trust. He looked at her, feeling the depth of their connection, and knew without doubt that he would follow her anywhere. The world they inhabited was dangerous, strange, and magnificent, and he wanted to face it all by her side. "I never imagined my life would be like this," he said softly. Gazing at the lights below, she turned to him, her expression serene but intense. "None of us can imagine everything. Life chooses paths we do not expect. But now we walk this path together. You are mine, and I am yours, forever." He felt a warmth, a completeness, a certainty he had never known. The bet that had seemed foolish, the dare that had started as a joke, had led him here to a life beyond imagination, bound to someone who was powerful, wise, and eternal. And he knew that the bond they shared was not just for now. It was for always. The days and nights continued, filled with shared experiences, learning, and discovery. They faced dangers together, explored hidden parts of the city, and grew more in sync with each passing moment. He had transformed not just physically or mentally, but emotionally and spiritually. The bond that had begun with a bite had grown into trust, love, and mutual respect. He understood her world and his place within it, and he embraced it fully. One evening, as the city slept beneath them, he took her hand in his. The simple touch carried the weight of everything they had experienced: the danger, the learning, the trust, and the intimacy that had blossomed between them. She looked at him, and he saw reflected in her eyes the same understanding, affection, and certainty that he felt. "We are together," he said quietly. "Always." "Yes," she replied, her voice soft but full of conviction. "Forever." And in that moment, under the silver light of the moon, he realized that he had truly become part of her life, and she part of his. The journey that had begun with a reckless bet had led to a bond that was eternal, a connection that transcended fear, doubt, and ordinary life. He was no longer just a human. He was her mate, her companion, and her equal in the world they shared. As dawn approached, the city bathed in soft light. He felt a profound sense of peace. The trials, the dangers, the lessons, and the quiet moments had all shaped him into someone stronger, more aware, and fully present in her world. And with that awareness came joy, fulfillment, and the certainty that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. Forever bound by the bond that had started with a dare and had grown into an eternal connection, he looked at her, a smile spreading across his face. "I am yours," he said. "And I am yours," she replied, her eyes glowing softly in the morning light. The world outside continued. Unaware of the bond they shared, the journey they had taken, and the life they would now live together. But he did not need the world's recognition. He had her, and she had him, and that was enough. The bet, the dare, the bite, and the trials all had led to this moment of clarity, connection, and completeness. And so, as the sun rose, they walked together into the city, two souls intertwined, ready for whatever the world could offer, secure in the knowledge that they were forever bound, forever mates, and forever together. Life had settled into a rhythm, though it was far from ordinary. He woke each day with a heightened awareness of the world around him, every sound, every movement, every shift in the air seeming sharper, clearer, more significant. He had grown accustomed to the changes the bite had brought, the bond that tied him to her, and the responsibility of being part of her world. Yet he knew that life with a vampire was never predictable, never simple, and that each day could bring new challenges. They spent their nights together, moving through the city in ways that most humans could not imagine. He had learned to blend into the shadows, to move silently, to sense danger before it arrived. She guided him carefully, allowing him to take risks that tested his abilities. While always being ready to intervene if necessary, he felt his confidence grow with each experience, though he remained aware that a single mistake could have grave consequences. One night, as they walked along the quiet riverbank, she stopped and looked out over the water. Her eyes reflected the moonlight, glowing softly, and he felt an overwhelming sense of connection, not just to her, but to the world around them. "There is more you must understand," she said. "Being my mate is not only about trust and loyalty, it is about learning to balance your human instincts with the reality of my world. It is about facing fear, danger, and the unknown without hesitation." He nodded, understanding that this was another lesson, another step in the journey that had begun with a reckless bet. "I am ready," he said. "Whatever comes next, I will face it with you." Her lips curved into a faint smile, and she took his hand in hers. "Good, then you will begin a deeper training tonight." They moved to a secluded part of the city, a place he had never noticed before. Hidden beneath the shadows of abandoned buildings, she taught him how to sense energy, to read intentions, and to move with a precision that made him feel almost like her. The training was rigorous, testing not only his body but his mind, his instincts, and his ability to trust her completely. Each exercise pushed him to the edge, yet he found himself growing stronger, more capable, and more confident as the hours passed. They encountered a situation that challenged him in ways he had not anticipated. A rogue vampire, one that had been causing trouble in the city, appeared suddenly aggressive and unpredictable. The air became tense, charged with danger, and he felt fear rising in his chest. But he remembered her words, her guidance, and the lessons he had learned. He steadied himself, focused on his senses, and prepared to act. She moved with fluid grace, intercepting the first attack.